In the first edition of ＳիվիլՆեթ's new weekly business digest, we take a look at recently released data about real estate, banking, tourism, and trade in Armenia. Nearly 150,000 real estate transactions have taken place in Armenia in the first 9 months of this year, according to new figures from the Cadastre Committee, the government body that oversees real estate. That's an increase of almost 5% from last year. Many of the transactions took place in Yerevan and other nearby towns. Property prices per square meter also continue to rise, with the average price per square meter in downtown Yerevan reaching almost $2,000 by the end of September. In recent months, prices per square meter also rose significantly in other major cities like Gyumri and Vanadzor. Importantly, the vast majority of rental agreements are not included in that 150,000 figure, since most rental agreements in Armenia are not properly registered with the government. Renters across Armenia have faced skyrocketing rents this year amid a massive influx of Russians following Russia's February invasion of Ukraine. While exact numbers are difficult to come by, many Yerevan residents say rents have doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled this year, and there are reports of landlords evicting their previous tenants in order to move in newly arrived Russians who can afford higher housing prices. The Russians moving to Armenia have also contributed to an unprecedented boom in money transfers and remittances to Armenian banks this year. According to newly updated data from Armenia's central bank, about $3.5 billion flooded into Armenian banks from abroad in the first 9 months of this year, an increase of more than double since last year. Transfers from Russia accounted for 2/3 of all transfers so far this year. Remittances from Armenians living outside the country, especially in Russia, have historically played a significant role in Armenia's economy, but the surge in transfers this year is different. The money pouring into Armenia is not just remittances from Armenians living abroad, but also transfers from Russians moving their savings abroad en masse. Armenian banks took in more money in the 3 summer months this year than in the first 3 quarters of last year. As a result, Armenian banks have seen profits triple year on year, recording almost $500 million in profits so far this year. In other banking news, Armenia's central bank granted a license this week to a company called Fast Credit Capital to open a new bank in Armenia. The new bank, called Fast Bank, will be the 18th commercial bank registered in Armenia. Russians are also playing a key role in Armenia's tourism sector, which is growing rapidly this year. Armenia has welcomed 1.4 million tourists in the first 10 months of this year, according to newly released numbers from the country's tourism committee. Nearly half came from Russia. Following longtime trends, the busiest months for tourism in Armenia were in the summer, with over 250,000 people visiting Armenia this August alone. Aside from Russia, other major centers of tourists to Armenia this year are Georgia, Iran, the United States, and Germany. While this year's figure of 1.4 million visitors so far still falls below Armenia's all-time record set in 2019, it dwarfs the total number of arrivals in the past 2 years. Less than 1 million people visited Armenia in 2020 and 2021, amid fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic and the Karabakh War. Importantly, many of the Russians moving to Armenia are classified as tourists by the Armenian government, since they can enter Armenia visa-free, just like tourists can. While it's unclear how many people out of that 1.4 million number were truly tourists, it's still clear on the ground that tourism has been booming in Armenia this year. Just like tourism, Armenia's trade is growing this year too. Armenia's Statistical Committee released new numbers this week, showing that imports to Armenia and exports from Armenia have risen significantly since last year. Experts say much of this growth in trade can be attributed to Armenia importing and then re-exporting products to Russia, which has seen an unprecedented number of sanctions imposed against it in response to its invasion of Ukraine. It's unclear exactly how much of the trade growth is due solely to re-exports. In the first 3 quarters of this year, imports to Armenia topped $1 billion according to the Statistical Committee. That is an increase of about 85% since last year. Most of the imports were machines and equipment. Meanwhile, Armenia exported goods worth over $3.5 billion so far this year, an increase of over 60% since the same time period last year. About 40% of those exports went to other countries in the Eurasian Economic Union, a Russian-led trade bloc. Most of the exports were mineral products, precious and semi-precious stones, and precious metals. The mining industry plays a central role in Armenia's economy, and many of the country's mines are ultimately controlled by Russian companies. In a related development this month, ＳivilNeթ scored a major legal win, with Armenia's administrative court ruling that the government must hand over documents requested under Freedom of Information laws regarding the controversial sale of Armenia's largest mine to a Russian company last year. Keep an eye out as our investigative reporters continue pressing for those documents. Our reporters also regularly invite experts to come to our studio here in Yerevan and discuss important developments in business, politics, and regional affairs. This week, Yeva Husyan, the co-founder and CEO of SoloLearn, a free-to-use digital platform that teaches coding languages, sat down with us to talk about her professional journey and the challenges of taking an Armenian tech startup worldwide. The full interview is available now, in English, on our website and YouTube channel.